What is going on, guys? Benny here. I am here today to talk about this beautiful ivory speaker. This is from the company Heco. A lot of people have been talking about the towers, but I haven't seen anything about the bookshelves. So these are the Heco Aurora 300s from the Aurora line. We'll talk about all of its awesomeness after the intro. Alright guys, Benny here, there's the intro. So, let's talk about this little guy. What should we talk about first? I guess we could just go over the specifications. I know I don't like doing that, but in terms of that, I guess we could. So, let's do that real fast. Alright, so for the Heco Aurora 300s, we have, okay, so obviously it's a two-way bookshelf bass reflex speaker. It has a sensitivity of 90 dB. Obviously the woofer here is like 6.5, 7 inches, 6.5. And then it does have a 1-inch dome soft tweeter here. So the impedance for this guy, it does dip as low as 4 ohms, but the recommended is 4 to 8 ohms. So I would say if whatever you're powering it with, just make sure it can go down to 4 ohms. With that too, the crossover frequency for this guy, since obviously it's a two-way, is at 3300 hertz. The power handling for this guy, it's like RMS 80, so then max 150 watts. And then the frequency response is 32 to 42,500 hertz. So outside the realm of human hearing. But with that, I don't think, we'll kind of go into more how low it goes in the next section. But with that, the recommended amplifier for this guy is 20 to 150 watts. And in terms of how big it is, let's get a tape measure. I'm back. Okay, so in terms of height, with the little rubber feet that it has on it, that comes installed for little pyramid feet, it's about 14 inches tall, 11.75 deep, and then 7 3/4 wide, 8 inches. All right, don't need that guy. Ha! So in terms of the materials they use on this is the oak finish, I believe. Ivory oak is what they call it. Let's look. Yep, ivory white. So, ivory white. So in terms of the speakers, I don't really like black speakers because they all look the same. So I like ones that pop, like this guy. So this has a white front. This is actually one solid piece from what I can tell. It goes all the way from the top and then goes onto the front. And then it has the rest of the cabinet it's adhered to. So with that, whatever finish this is on the side here, it's a veneer or a vinyl, I think. Looks like a vinyl, but it's a good looking vinyl. It's kind of like a washed out wood, which I do love. So with that, kind of a small story here. So with this guy, it was on sale. So you can buy these guys, just to let you know, you can buy them at audioadvice.com. I think they're exclusively there since they're in the US. But with this guy, one of the things when I ordered it, I think they're normally $519 is what MSRP is. And then they normally sell around $400. I think the price they are, just wait a minute. The price they are, I would say that the closest speaker that these sound to, and to me sound better, is the RP-600M by Klipsch. And I know those, when I had those, I did like them, but they do have that V-shaped frequency, which is exciting and dynamic and stuff like that. But the problem is since it's so V-shaped, right? Since it's so V-shaped, it kind of gets a little fatiguing over time because it has those horns, right? This guy has a soft dome tweeter and paper driver. So what does that do, right? If you guys are kind of new to this, what it kind of does is with the paper cone, it makes it sound a little bit more natural, as well as the timbre sounds a lot better in terms of, again, more natural sounding and not metallic, kind of like what the Klipsch RP-600M sound like, because that's a metal driver. So how did I put it? So in comparison to the RP-600M, not version 2. So in terms of comparison, there's one thing, the reason why this kind of embodies the comparison of the RP-600M is it does all the things the RP-600M does, but better. So in terms of that, one of the things about this speaker that's awesome and amazing is it has a sweeter top end than the RP-600M. It's got a bigger sound stage than the RP-600M. And also the center image actually is a lot better. I wonder if it's due to this waveguide, the computerized waveguide that they made here. And then on top of that, one of the other parts, when you listen to this guy, when I listened to the 600M next to this, there was no loss of information, but being that it's a soft dome tweeter and has a very good crossover, you don't have that issue of fatigue for long periods of time. And then also, one of the things that's really awesome about the RP-600M is the amount of bass that it throws out, and it's a bigger speaker. But with this guy, being that it's not as tall as the RP-600M, but this is definitely a party speaker in terms of putting out the energy, being very dynamic, as well as fun. And what I've noticed a lot since I've been doing these reviews, at least, is I've been pushing a lot more towards fun and less analytical in terms of how I see things. And I completely understand why, because being that I've been kind of in this hobby for so long now, I can't say so long, there's been people that have been in this hobby a lot longer than me. But when it comes to a little over 10, 12 years, kind of getting more into it now, obviously. I've been pushing more towards the music side of things. And I understand why, like I said, and I think a lot of people kind of lose that on the way when you're kind of jumping into a hobby and you've been in it for so long. You kind of lose your way of trying to, like, what you were trying to do in the first place, because it kind of just turns from like, I need the new thing, I need something that does this to my system and does that, but then you forget that this is listening to music, guys, and you listen to it for the enjoyment, not to just keep replacing your current gear to make it sound that much better for this much more money, right? But sorry, it was kind of like off a tangent. But okay, so in terms of the sound of this, guys, I kind of went over a little bit of it compared to the 600M. So if you guys have watched any other reviews on the 600M, definitely this guy, I would say, kicks it out of the water in terms of musicality, as well as more natural sounding and a sweeter top end, like I said. There's not a lot to say about it in terms of that it's a killer fucking speaker for such a low price. Because right now I think the new RP-600M 2s are going for $750. which is really expensive, I think, in terms of what you get for those. I'd rather get a different speaker made by Polk, but in terms of this, guys, this is probably one of the best budget speakers in terms of if you want that RP-600M sound, that energy that that speaker puts out. If you want a more natural sound and a less fatiguing speaker, this is definitely the guy to have, for sure, like hands down. Another cool thing about this guy too, it's a little bit cheaper, on the cheaper side, right? But you can also buy wire and bi-amp this guy too, which is pretty crazy, honestly. Also, some of the materials look like metal, but are not metal. So I'll put the B-roll on this, over it, but on the back, for where the port is, it looks like metal. It's made of plastic. The awesome looking metal plate that the binding posts are on, plastic. But the binding posts themselves, very good binding posts. So in terms of the materials they use, like I said earlier, they put the money in the materials that obviously make the sound better. And in terms of like the actual dampening and everything, it's pretty inert for it being very budget effective. So with that, guys, I know this feels like an improper review, but it's really hard to not compare it to the RP-600M because it sounds so much like it, but not so much like it, because it fixes those things that the original RP-600M had issues with, which was just the whole fatiguing part of it and kind of not that natural sound. But again, this does get up to very good volumes. I'm talking about, like, for me, I don't like listening like at super high levels personally, but I did listen to it up there. So when it up there, it kind of starts to collapse a little bit it collapses a little bit, but in terms of being to hold its own at those volumes, it does. For me, I don't like listening to music that loud. The only time I do is when I have headphones on and not speakers. But with that, guys, what else do I say about this guy? A couple of the other guys that I could compare it to is I do have these Q Acoustic 3030Is, which I love for bass. Those are some bass heavy bookshelves for sure. But with those guys, this is more of a more controlled, like I said, and natural sounding bass and mid-range driver. So in terms of a more all-around and encompassing sound, this still overtakes those. But if you want more bass, you could grab those because it seems a lot more boosted for those guys. But again, this is probably one of the best all-around speakers under $500. I'll probably be pulling in, I know a lot of people have done reviews of them, but the Yamaha C92, I think, C92, and those guys are around 300, so I'd really like to compare those guys to this, because that's $100 cheaper, but I wonder if it's close to this. I know a lot of people have said that it's even softer up top, but I want to know if it's that much less, because I'm always out for that budget type of speaker that can do it all. And this guy, in terms of music choice, I listened to everything on him. Dubstep, EDM, jazz, rock music, metal, death metal. I wouldn't listen to death metal on paper drivers, they just can't emulate that double bass sound. They just don't move fast enough. So it doesn't work well with death metal, but it passes. I'd say it passes, but death metal, it's not a normal thing you'd want to listen to on a paper driver. What else? Pop music, and it handles it very, very well. All of it very well. In terms of vocals, being that does have a paper driver and a very nice tweeter, where this guy shines the most, I would say, is with the vocalists that have more of that mid bass vocals, like kind of like I listen to Haley Reinhart a lot, and she's got that really lush, like low mid sounding voice. But another good thing about this guy is, again, it kind of smooths off that top end. So if you do listen to singers or like opera or something that's really up in that high range, you can listen to it for hours, because this speaker does tame that a little bit. If your system is a little bit fatiguing, this speaker will help tone it down for sure. And then in terms of what I ran through this, basically, I used the Saga Plus that I'm reviewing right now from Shit Audio. I used my Vidar 2 for the amp. I also used my SVS Soundbase, the original one. And then I did put these on my home theater, which is ran through a Denon X3300W AVR. And this did really well in my home theaters. Like I said, this is a very dynamic speaker. So obviously you kind of want towers for that, just so then you have a more full sound. But if you do slam this up against a wall, you get a lot of bass. So because of how there's this mosquito again, because how big the woofer is, which I'll have B-roll for that. But where'd it go? All right, guys. Well, with that, I'd say if you're gonna spend $500 or less, this would definitely be the speaker to run to, for sure. If you want a speaker that does a really good job at all around music, and it's nimble where it needs to be, throws out enough bass where it needs to be. In terms of my listening space, I know I've had a couple questions about that. Obviously, we're in my garage. So in here, I measured this garage. It's 20 by 20. So this is a 400 square foot room. It's got a bunch of stuff in it, because I don't like a room being completely dead, because otherwise that's not normal. Most people don't have a room that's just dedicated. A lot of people have the home theater room, which is kind of a mixture of hi-fi audio and their home theater speakers, because, you know, we all don't have extra rooms. But with that, yeah, probably best all-around speaker so far this year. All right, guys, so I didn't go over sound. I kind of just kept comparing it to the RP-600M. So I'm gonna do this really quick and kind of shove it in between in there. So with that, this guy, so the highs, very good. Like I said, compared to the RP-600M, it does very well at keeping all the information, but smoothing up the top. So with this, it does have very, very good high extension in there. In terms of the mids not nearly as V-shaped as the RP-600Ms, because like I said, the mid does sound very full and sweet in terms of for the vocals. Like I said, I really love listening to Haley Reinhart. Any vocals that are kind of like more mid to low, this sounds really, really good in the mids. In terms of, I would say it's more like a square, right? So it's kind of like a U shape more than a V shape. So with that, and then the bass is really good for this guy for being such a tiny speaker. And with that, it does put out, like obviously you could do the whole position thing where you push it closer to the wall for more bass if you want more bass, and pull it out of the room 3 or 4 feet. And then this guy still puts out very controlled bass at that level. And even at higher volumes, it does a very good job at being able to put that bass out. Because like when I listen to something like Dead Mouse or something like older dubstep or EDM, it does reach down below. It doesn't reach down to that 32 that it claims. I think it's more around 40 from what I can hear. But again, the room gain's gonna make the difference, as well as your positioning of the speaker is going to make a difference. But like I said, you want more bass, shove it against the wall. Not really recommended. Probably like 6 inches against the wall is probably closest. And then if you want it to be a more controlled bass, you'd want to pull it a little bit further out. All right, guys, I will see you in the next review. It'll probably be, like I keep saying it, these triangles, these active triangles, BR02BTs. And with that, guys, I do have a Patreon. So if you guys made it this far into the video, I'll put the Patreon link down below. And I will see you guys in the next review. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. See you guys then. Later.